Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. In this episode, Pastor Tyler is talking with Rick and Kris Monteen, who are starting a bridge group focused on divorce care. This group will meet in the Bridge Church Cafe at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, starting on April 20th. Now enjoy this conversation as Rick and Kris share their vision behind this new group.
Everybody, welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. Pastor Tyler Wolf here. If we haven't had a chance to meet, I am the Oconomowoc campus pastor, and I oversee our bridge group department, which is why we're here today. I am here with the Monteens. How you guys doing?
Great.
Thanks for having us.
I want to take a minute to highlight a bridge group that you guys are going to be leading, and it's actually a really special group because it's one of our brand new freedom groups. But before we get into that, would you guys just tell me a little bit about your family?
Absolutely. I'll let my wife go first.
So Rick and I met 9 years ago and have been married for almost 6 years. We have a daughter named Bella, who is 11, and just moved to the area in Waukesha from West Bend.
Nice. Cool. And I have had a chance to hear your guys' testimony, and it was probably one of the most enjoyable half hours of my week last week. And so I would love it if you guys would just each individually share a little bit about who you are as individuals, who you were before Christ, and where he's brought you.
Absolutely. I would say, before Christ, I've gone through several phases in life. I would say, like many people, before they came to Christ. I grew up in just a normal family, loving family on the north side of Milwaukee here. As I got older, I have an older brother and a sister. The influences on my older brother really hit me, and my parents, to kind of go against that, I would say, or try not to follow that same path that he chose to go down, which was more or less in the streets, sent me to a suburban school, and we kind of distanced ourselves from each other. However, when I was going into college, my senior year of high school, I graduated. I had an incident where I had a head injury that put me in a coma where I actually died and came back. And from that point on, my dream was always to be a Naval ROTC officer and serve my country. Well, you can't have a major head injury within 5 years of entering any officer and enlisted program. And that basically killed my dream. I would say, now I didn't handle that very well, and I went into a depressive state, and I self-medicated through drugs and alcohol, but also that experience going into that state brought me closer with my brother, and I kind of went with the mentality, if you can't beat them, join them. So I got involved with gangs and dealing and things of that, all that whole entire street life, and that kind of came to a head in January 27th, 2005, where I was at the time living in South Florida and had a moment with Jesus. Wow. I was at the end of my rope. I was kind of suicidal at that time, and there was a moment that I wanted to end it all. Prior to that day, I was up for 3 days partying and whatnot, and I finally got home, and I was in my bedroom, and I remembered something a friend of mine that I grew up with who was in the streets too that got saved 8 years earlier. He told me he was always trying to convince me and try to, plant seeds inside me and asked me to come with him to church and things like that. And I declined it because I was bitter at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said he would pray for me. And I asked him, well, how did you get saved? And he said, I just cried out and asked Jesus, if you are there, show me. So fast forward to that night, that somehow clicked in my head, and I asked that same prayer. I was like, Lord, if you are there, show me. And I fell on the ground, and I was on that ground just bawling and crying and all these things and just asking him, why weren't you there for this, and why weren't you there for that? Where were you at this time, and where were you at that time? And as I was there on that ground, had to be a couple of hours, every time I mentioned something of why you weren't there, he showed me how he was there and how he protected me from something worse. And I would tell you this, after I got up off of that ground, and again, remind you, I was up for 3 days partying. And when I got up off of that ground, I was completely sober.
Wow.
And from that point on, I started my journey following the Lord. And fast forward to 2016, I started going to DSOM and currently have my certification as an AG pastor. I have a heart for missions. I've been to Africa twice and Asia once. My heart is to build churches, and it's something I want to do in the future into the bush of Africa and partner with local ministries in those countries to bring income into those environments, but build a church for communities that are trying to spread the gospel.
Wow. So when you say you were in like a season of bitterness, did that have something to do with the head injury kind of crushing a dream of yours?
Absolutely. That was 100%. And that happened at 18, but I didn't really deal with that until I was 32. So I dealt with that bitterness and that anger and just that baggage for all those years until I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I read the book of Jonah. If I read anything in that book, here's what I see. A person who was like white knuckle gripping their vision of what a good life would be. And God was saying, I have a different vision for your life. And how many times did we see Jonah just get mad about his future?
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then, he never really turned around, but praise the Lord, you did.
Absolutely. I'm glad it happened to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know, Kris, that you share a heart for missions as well. Would you share a little bit about who you are and your background?
Yes. So I also grew up in a very loving home. Even though we didn't meet until we were almost in our 40s, we actually discovered we grew up less than a mile apart from each other.
Wow.
So I grew up in a Catholic home, and we learned about Jesus, we learned about God, but we didn't have the opportunity to learn about having a relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that was a vital piece that was missing from my life. And so I wouldn't consider myself truly saved until I actually learned about that. Mm-hmm. But I found myself at a very young age, in my early 20s, already divorced. I had gotten into a physically and verbally abusive marriage. And by the time I escaped that, I had zero confidence in myself. I had zero self-esteem. The bruises go away. And even though that's what you see, that's what looks the scariest, it's really the mental abuse that's worse and harder to get over. And I handled it completely wrong. I did not go to counseling and deal with those feelings I was having. I felt I could just handle it on my own. I was free now. I was going to be fine. And because of that, I made very poor decisions. I had no self-esteem at all. And because of the issues of the abuse that I received, I was looking for that fulfillment from men. I felt that I needed a man to tell me I was worthy or beautiful or smart in order for that to actually be true. And that stemmed from my abuse. And because I didn't deal with it, that's what I was looking for. And I spent years trying to find that fulfillment in men, that it's just not possible, because I didn't learn until later that that fulfillment can only be found in Jesus. And it wasn't until I was invited by a friend to go to church that I learned that, and that I was truly saved, and that I realized there were so many emotions that I had not dealt with. And so at that time, I needed to go to counseling and deal with all of that, and also depend on God and I intentionally spent 6 years single, just to learn to better myself, better my relationship with God, and just date Jesus. That's what I was told to do. And once I finally was at a point where I was completely content being alone, that's when I knew I was ready to date and find the man that God had for me.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. Well, I appreciate your guys' heart for people. It's awesome. It's refreshing. And you, Kris, will be leading a new bridge group that we call Freedom Groups here at the church. And so a little bit of background on those groups in general. At Bridge Church, our mission statement is we want to see people know God, find freedom, connect with others, and make a difference. In the find freedom part of that, we wanted to put a really practical handle. Okay, we know you want us to find freedom here, but how exactly do we do that? Well, Freedom Groups is a new category of bridge groups, our small groups at Bridge Church, that we are introducing. And the idea behind Freedom Groups is being able to settle your yesterdays, or find freedom from your yesterdays in order to find victory for your tomorrow. And so really these groups, this is language that makes a ton of sense to me, is really about unpacking your baggage and dealing with issues in order to have a better, more free tomorrow. And your story, as you share about the after effects of not only a destructive relationship, but divorce itself. So you will be leading a divorce care freedom group. Would you share a little bit about divorce care? I know you have a ton of experience in that. You have a heart for people who have gone through divorce or are considering divorce. Tell me about what it's all about and who that group is for.
Yes. So I actually went through divorce care myself once it was offered at the church that I was attending shortly after I was saved. And even being so many years out, it was amazing to me how much it dealt with the feelings I was having and the things that I thought I was alone on, and explaining the feelings that I was having. And so it was very beneficial to me. It encouraged a lot of healing in my life. And so I wanted to continue that. And so I have led this group 8 times now. Every time we experience so much healing in the group, there's several members who will go through it more than one time because you just learn something new every time. And this is really for anyone who has been through divorce, no matter how long ago it was. If you're currently going through a divorce, if you are considering a divorce, a couple that's considering divorce, or even the spouse or significant other of someone who has been divorced, in order to understand what your spouse is going through. This is beneficial for any of those areas.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think, would I be right to assume that someone considering divorce might have a really hard time coming to a group like this, like because of how it looks?
Absolutely. I mean, the title makes it sound like you're already divorced before you go, but
Sure.
Really it dives into so many of the emotions that you're going through. And just at a high level, one thing that really stuck with me when I was first going through this is understanding those emotions. They were explained in a way that you are mourning a death. It's a death of the marriage. It's a death of that one unit that you were and that you saw yourself being the rest of your life. It's a death of the future you thought you had. There's so many things besides just you're just unhappy or there was something going on where the divorce feels like the best decision at that time, that you don't realize the emotions you're going to go through after that, and just the death that you will mourn. And in some ways, it's very difficult to mourn a death of a person that's still there. Mm-hmm. There isn't you don't have that closure when the person is still there, but you're experiencing this death. And so there's so much more to it that it will explain about if you're considering a divorce, about not only the feelings you're having right now, but the feelings that you're going to have when you go through it and after you go through it. And I think that's important to know.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. You know, I think this divorce care group is so in line with the vision for these freedom groups, because whether it's divorce care like I'm describing with someone who is going through divorce and might be embarrassed to show up, or another recovery group, if you show up, then everyone might know that I struggle with this or that. And I go, yeah, that's what the church is all about. And it might be a little bit idealist to just tell everyone to stop caring what people think. But my hope is that people will have a true vision of what the church can and should be, where you come with all of your baggage and you're recklessly honest about who you are. Because if you walk in and say, I have no issues, we know your issue is probably just dishonesty, right?
And there's so much healing in this that comes from this. There's so much support that comes from each other in this group. In the beginning, when the group first starts meeting, sometimes there's some hesitance to open up and share the stories because they can be embarrassing. Sometimes there have been people in our groups that it has been their actions that have caused the divorce, and that can be very embarrassing to have to admit. But we grow almost into a family unit in that circle, and just meeting over that period of time, just growing closer. And as time goes on, eventually everyone feels comfortable enough to open up and share their stories. And it's really a circle of support. It's really about supporting each other because we have empathy for each other, because we're going through the same thing and we understand those feelings. It's not at all about judgment or anything like that. And so even if there is hesitancy or embarrassment embarrassment about joining. It's really about the healing that you'll receive from this.
That's awesome. I heard Scott Hagan say one time that what you cannot talk about owns you. And I look forward to people, because I'm not saying it's going to be easy to talk about divorce, but I am saying that I think that once people engage with this group, they're going to find freedom from something that has really plagued them. Because I've not gone through divorce, and I'm so thankful for someone like you that's willing to step up and answer the call to help hurting people. And so we're going to have details for when and where that divorce care group is going to be meeting. Is there anything else that you guys would share in closing?
I would just encourage anyone who is just feeling that tug of the Holy Spirit to attend this, that tug is happening for a reason, that you need to be there. And whether it is to, even if you feel that you've gone through divorce so many years ago and you're completely fine, there's things that will creep up that if you haven't dealt with that can really hinder future relationships. And I found that after going through my divorce and trying to move on, I was not in a place to be a good wife at all. It wasn't fair to anyone that I would try to be in a relationship with. And I wasn't going to be a good wife until I dealt with the things that had happened through the divorce and really leaned on God for that. So there's healing and benefit to attending this group no matter what stage you're at.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That was perfect. I appreciate you addressing everyone listening. And Kris and Rick, Monteen, so glad you guys are a part of Bridge Church, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.